My son kicked me out for his wife. A week later, they found out who really owned the house." Valerie Jennings stood by the kitchen window, the late morning sunlight casting sharp angles across the well-worn counters and faded linoleum floor. Her fingers gently smoothed the faded blue cardigan draped over her shoulders, the one Trevor had given her on her last birthday, before she turned to face the scene unfolding. Trevor looked uncomfortable, shuffling his weight from one foot to the other, while Jessica, with her flawless makeup and crisp blouse, planted her arms firmly on the kitchen island as if staking her claim. "Mom," Trevor began, voice tight. "Jessica and I talked, and we think it's time for you to find a new place. It's our home now." His eyes flicked away quickly, betraying his hesitation. Jessica smiled sweetly, but with an edge sharper than her glossed lips suggested. "You've been kind to stay this long, but it's time for some privacy. We want to make this house ours." Valerie's hands tightened on the edge of the sink. She blinked back, the sting flooding her chest, as her gaze landed on a half-hidden envelope shoved awkwardly to the side of the drawer, a delicate crease running across its golden embossed return address. She'd always kept that envelope tucked away, certain it contained something important. Now, Jessica lazily flicked it to the floor with her foot, murmuring with a dismissive shake of her head, "What's the point of holding on to old paperwork anyway?" Her voice held just enough volume to make the neighborhood's quiet stillness crack. The words pierced Valerie like an unspoken verdict: unwanted, dispensable, forgotten. Yet no one else seemed to notice the subtle glint of the envelope's gold seal lying limp against the scuffed floorboards. Trevor avoided her eyes, swallowing. "Mom, it's just best for everyone." The kitchen walls, once witnesses to family dinners and quiet moments, now felt cold and alien. The humming refrigerator sounded too loud, the ticking clock counting down a time Valerie hadn't agreed to. She thought of the nights she spent patching up his scraped knees, of the birthdays celebrated here. Now, those memories seemed like threats, shadows of a past Jessica wanted erased. Jessica's heels clicked sharply on the floor as she turned toward the door, smirking slightly. "We'll help you find somewhere nice, something more your style." Valerie's breath caught. "My style," she said softly, voice cracking. "This is my home." Jessica paused just long enough to flash a patronizing smile and replied, "Not anymore." The sharp sting of humiliation wrapped around Valerie, but beneath it, the blue cardigan felt heavier, like armor forged not just by memory, but by an unspoken promise to herself. Her gaze lingered on the envelope's golden crest one last time before she stepped back, the weight of what was being stripped away settling deep inside her. Her world was shifting, and she wasn't sure where she would stand once the dust settled. Yet that envelope, the one piece Jessica scorned without a second glance, held something unseen to them all, a whispered hope Valerie clung to amid the pain. The sunbeam catching the embossed letters on the envelope flickered like a fragile flame. She folded her hands, steadying herself. Whatever came next, that clue, hidden in plain sight, would be her shield. The silence thickened as the door clicked shut behind Jessica, leaving Valerie alone with the quiet hum of a house that suddenly felt too big, too empty, and full of stories she wasn't ready to surrender. The muted clatter of packing filled Valerie's small bedroom, while sunlight spilled cold across the floorboards where family photos once stood. Her hands trembled as she folded worn sweaters and slipped her favorite blue cardigan carefully into a bag, the fabric still soft despite years of wear. Downstairs, a louder, more unwelcome noise demanded attention. Through the half-open door, she heard Jessica's gleeful laughter rippling across the living room, where she held court among a cluster of well-dressed friends. "You should see the way she still clings to those boomer habits," Jessica said, her voice high and theatrical, exaggerating every syllable. "Like keeping those dusty old photos and pretending this isn't her son's future home." A sharp laugh followed, and Valerie bit her lip, swallowing the squeeze in her throat. The living room, once a steady backdrop of family snapshots and warm memories, now glowed with Jessica's modern flair. Sleek vases, minimalist art, brass accents all competing to erase what had come before. Trevor hovered awkwardly nearby, his words stiff and rehearsed. "Mom, we've talked about it. This is just better for everyone. He didn't look her in the eye. Each syllable felt like another brick in a wall being built around her, one she was already on the wrong side of. Outside, the early spring breeze fluttered the edges of a glossy brochure Jessica had carelessly dropped on the front porch. As Valerie slung the last of her belongings into an old suitcase, the screen door swung open gently. "Valerie, dear," a quiet voice called. It was Miss Green, her silver hair tucked beneath a simple scarf, who lived next door and had watched the family through decades. "I wanted to wish you luck." Valerie smiled, the gesture small but genuine. "Thank you, Miss Green." Miss Green stepped closer, lowering her voice so only Valerie could hear. "If you haven't already heard, there's an HOA meeting next Friday. Could be important, especially with new ownership like Jessica and her plans." Valerie's brow furrowed. Something about the way the older woman said new ownership struck a practical chord. It planted itself, quietly, in the back of her mind, a simmering thought that wouldn't quite rest. The neighbor gave her hand a gentle squeeze before stepping back. "Sometimes rules help more than we expect. Just keep your eyes open." Valerie nodded and turned away, suitcase in hand, the weight of Miss Green's words grounding her amid the swirl of uncertainty. Out the door, the garden smelled faintly of hyacinth and freshly cut grass, a rare softness in a sharp-edged morning. She paused on the curb, glancing back at the house, where laughter and clinking glasses continued, both alien and invasive. Beneath the sound, her heartbeat steadied, fueled by an unexpected flicker. The thought that maybe, just maybe, there were rules or rights yet to be uncovered, a chance to reclaim what felt lost. As she walked down the street, the sun caught at the corner of a small golden envelope peeking from her sweater pocket, a detail Jessica hadn't noticed, but Valerie intended to keep. It was a quiet promise to herself, a spark of hope against the tide. "If a moment like this ever hit close to home, I'd love to hear how you found your way forward." The small guest room at her cousin Carol's felt cramped and unfamiliar, the thin mattress creaking under Valerie's weight as she sat on its edge, the faded floral sheets a pale echo of the home she'd been forced to leave. She held her phone tightly, eyes scanning the rental listings once again, each inquiry ending in the cold refusal she'd come to dread. Insufficient income, one landlord had said. Another hadn't even bothered to answer. Night after night, she left voicemails for Trevor, her voice steady but fragile. "Hi, it's Mom. Just wanted to check in, and maybe talk about what's next." Each message ended with a hopeful but hollow tone, hanging in silence that stretched longer than comfort allowed. No return calls, no texts, just silence. Desperation knotted in her chest as she paced Carol's cramped living room. The weight of rejection was becoming a physical ache. Yet even in these moments, Valerie clung to that stubborn thread inside her, the faint scent of hope that refused to fade. One gray afternoon, she pulled the gold-embossed envelope from the corner of her suitcase, the paper edges softened by time, but mirroring the faded strength she tried to recall. The letter slipped from the envelope, and her eyes landed on a paragraph with a strange phrase, "Life estate transferable upon ownership change." It sounded legal, heavy with possibility, but it meant nothing without context. She remembered Miss Green's quiet words from the neighbor's yard. HOA meeting next Friday. Could be important. Valerie's fingers traced the words as her mind connected dots for the first time. Perhaps this was the missing piece, something concrete amid the shifting uncertainty. This wasn't just paperwork lost to memory or dismissed as old. It held weight. Legal weight. Her heart quickened, despite the exhaustion dragging across her bones. She didn't fully understand what it meant, but the phrase promised that the house wasn't just up for grabs as Jessica made it seem. A legal hinge on which her future might still turn. This flicker of hope cut through the shadow gathering in her mind, proof that she wasn't entirely out of options. Desperation was still there, fierce and raw, but alongside it, a glimmer of possibility. That evening, Valerie hesitated, nearly folding the papers and sliding them back into her purse. The room's silence pressed down like a weight, but she didn't. The envelope remained in her hand, a silent promise she wasn't ready to surrender. Outside, the last light of day filtered through the cracked window pane, and Valerie, wearing the protective shroud of her faded blue cardigan, whispered softly, "There's still a way." The rain tapped steadily against the laundromat's grimy windows, streaking them with uneven lines that blurred the city outside into a watercolor of gray. Valerie stood suspended between the hum of washers and dryers and the chill that crept through the cracked door, her reflection a ghostly, cracked echo of herself. Exhaustion settled deep in the lines around her eyes, and the comforting weight of her faded blue cardigan hung loosely around her shoulders, dull and soft like a shield barely holding her together. Another day, another no had echoed in her mind, the sting of rental rejections carving wounds where hope had once been. Her fingers trembled as she cradled the phone. A new message appeared, a picture from Jessica. The image showed their old bedroom, now gleaming with stiff modern furnishings and harsh lighting. On the nightstand lay a glossy magazine, and in the corner, the bouquet of bright flowers. The caption read, "Hope you're comfortable." The words hit sharper than any cold rain, mocking Valerie's displacement. She swallowed a bitter lump, brushing away tears that streaked unchecked down her cheeks. Fumbling through the worn leather of her purse, she pulled out a small, photo-worn frame, a snapshot of Trevor as a boy, his smile innocent and bright. Behind it, something tucked away years ago slipped free, a folded, notarized document, its yellowed paper curled at the edges. Hands shaking, Valerie unfolded it carefully, the printed words revealing rights she hadn't fully understood before. Life estate, a legal term that tethered her right to reside in the house lifelong, unless she chose otherwise. Attached to the deed, the document was like a secret map she'd never been told to follow. The laundromat's fluorescent lights flickered overhead, dulling and sparking in quiet rhythm. Valerie's breath hitched. For the first time in weeks, despair softened into something quieter, a focus sharp enough to cut through the fog of embarrassment and helplessness. Jessica and Trevor hadn't just been callous, they'd been reckless, blinded by assumption. Neither had bothered to read this vital paper that could change everything. She felt the familiar, protective weight of the blue cardigan as a steady warmth, a quiet reminder of who she was beneath the humiliation. Her heart pulsed with the gravity of revelation. Is this document held true? It wasn't just a thread of hope. It was a rope strong enough to hold fast. But she would have to fight to be heard. Outside, the rain intensified, pounding the pavement with steady insistence like a call to action. Valerie folded the papers with new determination, her fingers steady now, her mind racing toward the next step. It wasn't over, not by a long shot. If a moment like this ever hit close to home, I'd love to hear how you found your way forward. Valerie spread the documents across the worn kitchen table in her cousin Carol's apartment, the soft hum of the air conditioner mingling with the distant sounds of city traffic. The yellowed papers, fragile and dense with legal jargon, lay between her and Ms. Green, the seasoned neighbor who had retired from managing real estate contracts years ago. Ms. Green adjusted her glasses, her eyes scanning each line slowly but deliberately. "These aren't ordinary papers," Ms. Green murmured, tapping the page lightly. "This deed, it's got a life estate clause. That means you have the legal right to live in that house for as long as you want. It can't be sold or transferred without your consent while you're alive." Valerie traced the embossed seal on the notarized document, a faint hope kindling in her chest. But Jessica and Trevor must have overlooked it, or maybe, she hesitated, searching for words. Or maybe they didn't want to understand it, Ms. Green said quietly, a flicker of sadness in her voice. "Some people don't bother reading the fine print if it works against their plans." Valerie swallowed hard, the weight of years of quiet sacrifices suddenly buoyed by this newfound power. Ms. Green continued, "The Homeowners Association meeting is next Friday, right? You need to be prepared. Jessica's probably aiming to assert full control, But this clause gives you a legal foothold. The practical reality of the timeline sharpened Valerie's focus. I'll need to present the original deed and supporting documents. Her voice steadied as she began to map out the steps ahead in her mind. Yes, bring everything. The HOA has rules about ownership updates and tenant rights. If you present this clearly, they'll have to recognize your life estate. Miss Green assured her, giving a nod of encouragement. Valerie sighed, the mix of anticipation and anxiety twisting inside her like a knot. Losing the house meant more than just a roof. It was about dignity and legacy, a home filled with memories of Trevor's childhood and her late husband's steady presence. It's risky, Ms. Green warned. If they get control unchecked, it could mean permanent loss for you. But with this, you have a real chance. Valerie's gaze fell on her folded, blue cardigan resting on the chair, a symbol now not just of vulnerability, but growing strength. She thought of the long road ahead, but welcomed the clarity. This wasn't just about legal documents. It was about standing up quietly for herself, armed with truth and patience. The clock ticked steadily as plans took shape. The next chapter was uncertain, but at least it wasn't unwinnable. When dignity finally speaks, who tends to listen in your world? The community center's meeting room buzzed with quiet murmurs as Valerie stepped inside alongside Miss Green, clutching the worn pages of the notarized deed and the gold-embossed envelope as though they were shields. The familiar scent of polished wood and paper filled the air, mingling with the soft rustle of printed agendas and whispered greetings. Jessica was already there, radiating confidence, her polished heels clicking sharply against the floor as she approached the HOA president's table with an assured smile. "This is the new lady of the house," Jessica announced casually, offering a wave that swept across the room like a curtain call. Trevor lingered behind her, cheeks flushed, avoiding eye contact. Valerie swallowed, heart pounding, before speaking with quiet authority. "I'd like to present a document for review." Her voice was steady, but every syllable felt heavy with significance. The president nodded, gesturing for Valerie to approach. As she laid the deed and envelope on the table, the room hushed, anticipation threading through the air. The president adjusted his glasses and began to read aloud a passage. "The property ownership is subject to a life estate held by Valerie Jennings. This estate guarantees the right of residency for the said individual for the duration of her lifetime. Unless voluntarily relinquished." Silence fell thick and sudden, like a weight pressing on everyone's shoulders. Trevor's face drained of color, his lips parting but no words forming as the reality sank in. Jessica's confident mask faltered. Her eyes darted to Valerie with a flicker of something. Anxiety mingled with a faint trace of guilt. "For clarity," the president continued, "any attempts to transfer ownership or make changes to residency without consent from the life estate holder are invalid under HOA policy." Jessica's posture stiffened, and she swallowed hard. I wasn't aware of this clause," she said, voice tight, but not entirely defensive. Valerie's gaze locked with Jessica's, unflinching yet compassionate. "It's in the documents your family had all along. I just found it." Her words were calm, cutting through pretenses. The room seemed to lean in, absorbing the unfolding truth. Miss Green placed a steady hand on Valerie's shoulder, an unspoken affirmation of solidarity. Trevor stepped forward, voice wavering. "Mom, I never meant for this to happen. I'm sorry." The president closed the folder decisively. "The association will uphold Mrs. Jennings' rights accordingly. Any unauthorized changes to ownership records will be reversed immediately." Jessica nodded slowly. The fight faded and replaced by a humbled recognition. The neighbors, some previously uncertain, now looked at Valerie differently, not just as someone displaced, but as a rightful owner reclaiming her place. Valerie's fingers tightened around the documents, relief washing over her like a quiet tide. The blue cardigan, soft yet resilient, seemed to grow heavier with meaning, a symbol of endurance, justice, and the power of quiet truth. If a moment like this ever hit close to home, I'd love to hear how you found your way forward. The community center's meeting room held an unusual quiet as neighbors, board members, and curious onlookers settled into their seats, eyes flicking toward the front, where Valerie stood, a quiet pillar of calm. Her blue cardigan, worn soft from years, now a symbol more than a garment, rested lightly on her shoulders, catching the warm afternoon light filtering through the tall windows. Beside her, Miss Green offered a reassuring nod, hands folded patiently. The weight of years of wisdom evident in her steady presence, the HOA president cleared his throat, his voice measured but firm. After careful review, we have confirmed that the life estate clause allows Mrs. Jennings the right to reside in the property indefinitely unless she willingly relinquishes it. Any attempts to remove or dispossess her without her consent are invalid according to our bylaws. Murmurs rippled across the room as the gravity of the announcement sank in. Trevor stood with his shoulders bowed, a palpable mix of regret and relief crossing his features. When he stepped forward, his voice was hesitant but sincere. "Mom, I'm sorry for everything. I let Jessica's influence cloud my judgment. You deserve better, and I want to make things right." Valerie met his gaze, her eyes warm yet steady. "Thank you, Trevor. It's not about blame. It's about moving forward with honesty and respect." Jessica sat quietly in the corner, her usual confidence replaced by a deep weariness. Her cheeks glistened with unshed tears, the tension finally breaking. As she rose to leave, her whispered apology barely carried to Valerie's ears, but it was enough. A small crack in the walls she'd built. The president announced that all attempts to change ownership records without Valerie's approval would be formally reversed. The official papers were signed, reaffirming her legal right to the home she had built and nurtured through decades. Neighbors who had once whispered behind her back now approached with warm smiles and quiet words of support. An older couple offered to help with yard work in the coming weeks. A young mother shared a freshly baked pie, a simple gesture of kindness. The room, once stark and tense, softened into a place of community and healing. Valerie fingered the edge of her blue cardigan, feeling the steady comfort it provided. This wasn't just a victory on paper. It was a reclaiming of dignity, a reaffirmation of her place, not only in the house, but in her family and community. The weight of humiliation that had hung over her weeks ago was lifting, replaced by a quiet strength born of perseverance and grace. The long road ahead still held challenges, but in that moment, surrounded by faces transformed by truth, Valerie stood fully herself, unbreakable and respected. The blue cardigan, once a symbol of vulnerability, had become the emblem of a quiet triumph, woven with threads of justice, empathy, and enduring hope. The house felt different the morning Valerie returned, a quieter, softer place now that certainty had settled like sunlight across the hardwood floors. Her feet touched the familiar welcome mat, worn thin from years of care, and she paused, breath catching, as memories brushed against her like a gentle breeze. The blue cardigan hung quietly over her shoulders, its faded fabric a comforting weight, no longer just a shield, but a symbol of everything she had endured and reclaimed. Trevor was already in the kitchen, sipping coffee, eyes meeting hers with a cautious warmth. "Good morning, Mom," he said softly, his tone threaded with humility and something new, respect. Valerie nodded, smiling gently. "Good morning, Trevor. Let's take it one day at a time." Outside, birds chirped through budding branches, a sign of renewal both simple and profound. Valerie moved through the house with calm purpose, placing a fresh bouquet of daisies on the windowsill, a little act of celebration for herself and the home she had fought so hard to keep. Later, at the community center where she volunteered, Valerie shared her story quietly but firmly, with a handful of seniors gathered in a circle. "Knowing your rights can make all the difference," she told them. "Perseverance isn't about never feeling breaking. It's about honoring your own truth, no matter what others say." Her voice carried not just lessons, but empathy born from struggle, humility forged in moments of doubt, and kindness chosen over bitterness. She watched as faces softened, as hope took root in wary eyes. Her story had become their armor, too. One morning, after a season of healing and rebuilding, Valerie stood by the front door and slipped her blue cardigan from her shoulders. She carefully hung it on the coat rack, the same one Trevor had used to place his birthday gift years ago. The gesture was quiet but powerful, a full circle wrapped in threads of resilience. Valerie's lips curved into a peaceful smile, eyes shining with a steady light. Nothing important would go unnoticed again. The past could not be undone, but it had forged a new beginning, one defined by dignity, self-worth, and unshakable resolve. If this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button. See you in our next story.